I'm Alvina Coleman, 30 years old. My world tilted at a family dinner when my older brother's voice cut through the chatter, dripping with venom. Freeloaders. Shameless. His eyes scanned my jeans and t-shirt, and that sneer of his pierced deeper than any word. My parents sat across the table, their silent, screaming agreement, their smug faces heavy with judgment. Years of being dismissed as the lesser child came crashing down on me in that moment. But I didn't flinch. I smiled, pushed back my chair, and walked away, their laughter echoing behind me. That night, something snapped inside me. I was done being their punching bag. 6 months later, they appeared at the gates of my villa in Naples, Florida, their voices trembling, begging for my help. My once arrogant brother looked small, and my parents couldn't even meet my eyes. I leaned against the doorframe, my heart steady, and said, "Welcome to the freeloader's mansion. Pity, no charity today." Their faces crumbled, but I felt nothing. From the child they ridiculed to the woman who built an empire they never believed in, I had finally turned their scorn into my strength. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, freedom, and rewriting my own story. If you were in my place, would you forgive them or walk away forever? Drop your answer in the comments below. Years before that dinner, I gave up my dreams for Luke. At 18, I stood at a crossroads, clutching an acceptance letter from a prestigious art school, a full scholarship, my ticket to a life of painting and creating. But my parents had other plans. "We can't afford both of you in college," my mother said, her voice flat, eyes fixed on the kitchen table. "Your brother's business degree comes first." My father nodded, his silence a heavy verdict. Luke, 3 years older, was their golden child, the one they pinned their hopes on. I was just the younger sister expected to step aside, so I did. I tore up the letter, my heart splintering with every rip. Instead of art studios, I took shifts at a diner, pouring coffee and scrubbing counters to cover Luke's tuition. Each paycheck I sent home felt like a piece of myself slipping away. My parents never asked how I managed, never noticed the bags under my eyes or the paintbrushes gathering dust in my room. "Luke's going to make us proud," my mother would say, her smile wide as she showed me his report cards. My father would clap Luke on the back, boasting about his future CEO. I'd nod, swallowing the ache, telling myself it was for family. Luke soaked it up. He'd stride into our house, tossing his car keys on the counter, talking about his big plans, startups, investment success. "You should get a real job, Alvina," he'd say, smirking as if my diner shifts were a hobby. Never once did he thank me. Never once did he ask what I'd given up. My parents didn't either. To them, I was the responsible one, the one who shouldered the bills while Luke chased glory. Family duty, my mother called it, her words sharp as a blade. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my dreams of art school fading like old sketches. The diner's grease clung to my skin, a constant reminder of what I'd lost. But their dismissal lit a fire in me. Luke's arrogance, my parents' blind favoritism, it hurt, but it also sharpened my resolve. I started saving, not just for them, but for myself. I'd take night classes when I could, sneaking in books on business and technology between shifts. I wasn't going to stay their doormat forever. One evening, after a double shift, I found Luke at home, sprawled on the couch, bragging about his latest business idea. "You wouldn't get it," he said, waving me off when I asked a question. My mother laughed as if my curiosity was a joke. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. I stood there, hands still smelling of fryer oil, and felt something shift. Their words, their disregard, were no longer just wounds. They were fuel. I began to see Luke for what he was, entitled, ungrateful, blind to my sacrifices. My parents weren't much better, their praise for him a constant echo drowning out my existence. I'd given up my future for a brother who mocked me, for parents who saw me as an obligation. But I wasn't done. Deep down, I knew I could build something of my own, something they couldn't ignore. I started sketching plans, not for paintings, but for a future where I'd stand tall, where their voices wouldn't define me. The years dragged on. I worked, I saved, I learned. Luke graduated, launched his startup, and basked in my parents' pride. I was still the afterthought, the one who helped out. But every late night shift, every dollar I didn't send home, was a step toward my escape. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. And though the hurt of their disregard never fully faded, it pushed me harder. I'd show them, not with words, but with what I could become. The years of being overlooked and sacrificing in vain had carved a fierce resolve within me. If they saw me only as a shadow, then I would create a light of my own. Instead, I poured every ounce of energy into building something that was mine alone, a startup to change lives. My idea was simple but bold, an online learning platform for underserved students, kids who couldn't afford tutors or fancy schools. I wanted to give them a shot, the kind I never got. I started in a cramped apartment, my desk a folding table covered in coffee stains. Late nights blurred into early mornings as I sketched wireframes, coded prototypes, and wrote pitch decks. My hands shook the first time I tested the platform, a basic app with math and reading lessons for high schoolers. It crashed twice, but I kept at it, fixing bugs until dawn. I wasn't a tech genius, just stubborn. Every error taught me something new. Every failure pushed me to try again. I took online courses to fill the gaps in my knowledge: coding, user design, business strategy. Sleep became a luxury. I lived on instant noodles and determination. I reached out to teachers, nonprofits, anyone who'd listen. Most ignored me, but a few saw potential. A local community center let me test my platform with their students. The first time a kid sent me a message saying, "I passed my algebra test because of you," I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I knew I was on to something real. I started pitching to investors, my voice steady despite sweaty palms. Rejections piled up, dozens of no's from venture capitalists who didn't see the value in teaching kids who couldn't pay. But I kept going, refining my pitch, showing data from my early users. 6 months in, I got my break, a meeting with a venture capital firm in Miami. I walked in with a laptop and a dream, walked out with a handshake and a promise of $1 million in seed funding. That moment felt like standing on a mountaintop, the world wide open. With the money, I hired a small team: designers, coders, educators who believed in the mission. We rebuilt the platform, adding video lessons, quizzes, and a chatbot to answer student questions. I worked alongside them, reviewing every line of code, every lesson plan. We launched in 3 school districts, then 10. Teachers sent emails praising how our app helped kids who'd been falling behind. Parents thanked us for making learning free and accessible. My inbox filled with stories of students who'd found hope through our work. The numbers spoke for themselves. Within a year, we had 50,000 active users, then 100,000. Schools across Florida signed contracts integrating our platform into their classrooms. I negotiated every deal myself, learning to hold my ground against executives twice my age. The work was grueling, but every contract, every user was a brick in the foundation I was building. I wasn't just creating a startup, I was creating a legacy. Then came the call from Forbes. They wanted to feature me in their 30 under 30 list for education. I almost dropped my phone when they told me. The photo shoot was surreal. Me, in a blazer I'd borrowed from a friend, standing under bright lights, smiling for a magazine I'd read as a teenager. When the article came out, I read it alone in my apartment. My name in bold, Alvina Coleman, revolutionizing education for underserved youth. I didn't cry this time. I just sat there, letting it sink in. I'd done this. Me, not my family, not anyone else. I never told my parents or my brother about any of it. Their voices, calling me a burden, dismissing my worth, still echoed in my head. But I didn't need their approval anymore. I stopped checking their messages, stopped hoping they'd see me differently. My value wasn't tied to their praise or their scorn. It was in the late nights, the code I wrote, the students I helped. I was defining myself step by step, and no one could take that away. The world was starting to notice what I'd built. Invitations to speak at conferences piled up, but I stayed focused on the work. My team and I were planning to expand to more states, to reach more kids. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing: I was just getting started. My platform wasn't just a business. It was proof that I could rise above, that I could create something that mattered. As my new life was beginning to take shape, the shadow of my family returned through a single text from Mary. "Dinner this weekend," it read. "We want to reconnect." My mother's words felt like an olive branch, but I hesitated. Years of their dismissal flashed through my mind, yet a small part of me hoped for something different. I typed back a quick, "Okay," slipped on my usual jeans and t-shirt, and drove to my parents' house, bracing myself for whatever was coming. The table was set with my mother's favorite dishes, the air thick with forced warmth. My father greeted me with a stiff nod, his eyes scanning my casual outfit before looking away. Luke lounged at the head of the table, his suit crisp, his smirk sharper. A few cousins and an uncle filled the other seats, their chatter light but strained. I sat quietly, picking at my food, waiting for the reconnection my mother promised. It didn't take long for the mask to slip. Luke leaned back, swirling his wine glass, his gaze fixed on me. "Still dressing like you're broke, huh?" he said, his voice loud enough to silence the table. My cousins glanced down, uncomfortable, but Luke wasn't done. "What do you even do all day? Live off Mom and Dad's scraps?" His laugh cut through the room, sharp and cruel. I clenched my fork, my face burning, but I kept my expression neutral. My mother shifted in her seat, her lips pressed thin, but she said nothing. My father stared at his plate, his silence louder than words. Luke leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with mockery. "You're a freeloader, Alvina. Shameless," he shouted, slamming his glass down, the wine sloshing over the rim. The room froze. My uncle coughed awkwardly. My cousins avoided my gaze, but my parents didn't move. Their eyes, cold and approving, told me everything. They agreed with him. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the same dismissal I'd endured for years. But this time it wasn't just a quiet slight. It was public, raw, meant to humiliate. My heart pounded, a storm brewing inside, but I refused to let it show. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the tense silence, and forced a smile. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. I grabbed my keys and walked out, their whispers trailing behind me. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. Luke's words echoed. Freeloader, shameless, each syllable a blade. My parents' silence hurt worse, their refusal to defend me a betrayal deeper than any insult. I'd spent years giving them everything, and this was how they saw me. The anger I'd buried for so long surged, hot and unstoppable. I wasn't the naive girl who'd torn up her dreams for them anymore. I'd built something they couldn't touch, and I wasn't going to let their scorn define me. As I drove away, my mind raced. Luke's arrogance, my parents' complicity, they thought they knew me, thought I was nothing. But I knew the truth. I'd created a platform that changed lives, secured millions in funding, earned recognition they couldn't imagine. They didn't deserve to know it, not yet. But their words lit a fuse. I wasn't going to stay silent forever. This dinner wasn't the end. It was the spark. I'd show them who the real freeloader was, not with arguments, but with actions they couldn't ignore. The next morning, I sat in my villa's office, my resolve like steel. I opened my laptop, my fingers steady as I pulled up bank records. I logged into my banking app and froze every payment to their accounts. My accountant got a call next. Clear instructions to block any future transfers. My phone buzzed with a message from Mary. "Can you help with the electric bill this month?" "Just a little." I stared at the words, my jaw tight, then deleted the text. For years, I'd been their financial crutch, bailing them out while they praised Luke and dismissed me. No more. Cutting them off felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, a weight lifting from my shoulders. 3 days later, Luke called. I ignored it, expecting another jab. But what came was worse. He'd dug through bank records and found the truth. Years ago, I'd anonymously invested $50,000 in his startup when it was just a shaky idea. I'd done it through a third-party fund, not wanting his thanks or their approval. I'd believed in his dream once, despite his arrogance. But instead of gratitude, Luke took to Twitter, his post a vicious lie. Alvina Coleman, my so-called sister, is a selfish parasite who's destroying our family. She hoards her money and turns her back on us. The post racked up hundreds of retweets and thousands of views, his followers piling on with venom. "Ungrateful brat," one wrote. "Family wrecker," said another. My phone buzzed relentlessly as strangers tagged me, their words sharp but hollow. I scrolled through the thread, my pulse steady despite the sting. Luke's betrayal wasn't new. It was just louder now, splashed across social media for all to see. He'd taken my investment, my sacrifice, and spun it into a narrative that painted me as the villain. His audacity didn't shock me. It fueled me. I wasn't going to let his lies define me. I picked up my phone and called Aaron Blake, my best friend and a lawyer with a knack for cutting through chaos. "Aaron," I said, my voice calm but edged with fire, "I need you to help me bury this. I'm done playing nice." Aaron's response was immediate. "Give me everything. Every receipt, every bank statement, every loan agreement. We'll build a case they can't dodge." I spent the next 2 days pulling records from my files. There were emails from George promising to repay a $7,000 loan for their kitchen remodel. Never touched. Mary's texts begging for $2,000 for unexpected expenses sat unanswered in my inbox. The investment in Luke's startup was there too, documented through the fund's transaction logs. Clear as day, the total was staggering. Over $150,000 poured into their lives, money I'd earned through sleepless nights and relentless work. Erin reviewed the files over a video call, her eyes narrowing as she scanned each page. "This is ironclad, Alvina," she said. "They've got no ground to stand on." I asked Erin to compile it into a dossier. Every dollar accounted for, every promise broken, laid bare. I wasn't sure when I'd confront them, but I wanted the truth ready, undeniable. Luke's Twitter expose was still spreading, his followers amplifying his lies, some even tagging my company's account, trying to smear my reputation. I didn't fire back online. That wasn't my style. My battlefield was facts, not hashtags. I spent hours with Erin strategizing over coffee, mapping out how to present the evidence when the time came. "We don't just want them to back off," Erin said, her voice sharp. "We want them to choke on their own words." As I organized the last of the documents, a quiet confidence settled in. Luke thought he could rally a mob against me, but he'd miscalculated. His startup, built partly on my investment, was faltering. I'd seen the signs in industry reports, though I kept that to myself. George and Mary, dependent on my handouts, had no idea what was coming. I'd spent years propping them up, only to be vilified. Now I was rewriting the story. The dossier wasn't just proof of their debts. It was a mirror, forcing them to face their ingratitude. 6 months later, my villa's gate buzzed. I checked the security camera and saw my parents and Luke standing outside, their faces tense under the morning sun. My stomach tightened, but I wasn't surprised. I'd heard whispers through industry contacts. Luke's education startup had crashed, bled dry by his reckless spending and half-baked decisions. They weren't here to apologize. They wanted something. I pressed the intercom button and let them in, my expression unreadable as I prepared for what was coming. They stepped into my living room, their eyes darting over the sleek furniture and wide windows. Mary clutched her purse, her knuckles pale. George avoided my gaze, his shoulders slumped. Luke, though, stood tall, his jaw set as if he still had something to prove. I gestured to the couch, but they stayed standing, the air thick with unspoken expectations. "We need to talk, Alvina," Mary said, her voice soft but trembling. "Luke's in trouble. His company, it's gone under. We need your help." I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Luke shifted, his hands shoved in his pockets, but he didn't speak. George cleared his throat. "It's just a rough patch," he said, his tone pleading. "You've got the means, Alvina. You could get him back on his feet." The audacity hit me like a slap. After years of their scorn, after Luke's lies on Twitter, they stood in my home asking me to save him. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for my laptop and opened it with deliberate calm. "Before we talk about help," I said, my voice steady, "let's talk about debts." I turned the screen toward them, displaying a dossier Erin had prepared. Emails, bank statements, and signed loan agreements filled the screen, each one a testament to their ingratitude. $5,000 for your car loan, George," I said, clicking to a scanned receipt. $3,000 for Mary's medical bills, $10,000 for your HVAC system, and Luke, $60,000 for your college tuition paid in full, no questions asked. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. That's over $200,000, none of it repaid. Mary's face flushed, her eyes dropping to the floor. George shifted, his mouth opening, then closing. Luke's bravado cracked, his cheeks reddening as he stammered. That's not fair, Alvina. I didn't ask for your money. You threw it at us to play the hero. His voice rose, defensive, but it lacked the venom of his old taunts. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. You didn't ask? I said, pulling up another email, one from him years ago, begging for just a little help to cover his tuition's final semester. This says otherwise. The room went quiet, the weight of the evidence suffocating. Mary's hands trembled as she gripped her purse tighter. We didn't know it was that much, she whispered, her voice barely audible. George looked away, his face a mask of shame. Luke tried to rally, crossing his arms. So what? You're rich now. You can afford to help. My startup was solid until the market tanked. I almost laughed. His company hadn't failed because of the market. It was his mismanagement, his flashy office leases, his refusal to listen to advisors. I'd seen the reports. The numbers didn't lie. I stood, closing the laptop with a soft click. You called me a freeloader, Luke, I said, my eyes locked on his. You screamed it in front of everyone, and you all nodded along. So, let me show you something. I gestured to the room around us, the marble floors, the art on the walls, the life I'd built without their help. Welcome to the freeloader's mansion. Pity, no charity today. The words landed like a blade, sharp and final. Luke's jaw dropped, his bravado gone. Mary gasped, her hand covering her mouth. George just stared, his silence louder than any plea. I walked to the door and opened it, my posture unyielding. You've taken enough, I said. Pay back what you owe, then we'll talk. Until then, don't come back. Luke started to protest, but George put a hand on his shoulder, shaking his head. Mary's eyes welled up, but she didn't argue. They shuffled out, the gate closing behind them with a heavy clang. I stood alone, my heart steady, the weight of their expectations finally gone. They'd seen the truth, and I'd seen their shame. For the first time, I felt free. 1 week later, I stood on a stage facing young dreamers. The Naples Community Center buzzed with energy, packed with teenagers from underserved schools, their eyes bright with curiosity. I'd organized this free tech education workshop to share my online learning platform, a tool I'd built to give kids like them a shot at their ambitions. The projector glowed behind me, displaying interactive lessons. I'd designed math modules, coding basics, tools to unlock their potential. But this wasn't just about software. I wanted them to hear my story, to know they could rise above any obstacle just as I had. I adjusted the microphone, my voice steady as I began. I'm Alvina, I said, scanning the crowd. And I built this platform because I believe in you. But it wasn't easy. My own family called me worthless, told me I'd never amount to anything. They saw my dreams as a burden, my efforts as a joke. The room went quiet, the kids leaning forward. I didn't name Luke, George, or Mary. There was no need. The pain of their dismissal was universal. In a way, these kids understood. I could have let their words define me, I continued, but I chose to build something bigger than their doubts. You can too. The workshop unfolded smoothly. I walked the teens through the platform's features, showing them how to access courses for free, how to track their progress, how to turn ideas into reality. A girl in the front row, maybe 15, raised her hand. What if your family doesn't believe in you? She asked, her voice small but fierce. I smiled, remembering my own battles. You don't need their approval, I said. Your worth isn't in their words. It's in what you create, what you give back. Keep going, even when it's hard. Her nod, determined and bright, made my chest swell. This was why I'd fought, why I'd kept building. As the day went on, I answered questions, shared tips, and watched the kids dive into the platform, their excitement infectious. A boy with worn sneakers stayed late, tinkering with a coding module, his grin wide as he got his first program to run. Moments like these reminded me why I'd poured everything into this work. It wasn't about proving my family wrong. It was about lifting others up, giving them the tools I'd wished for when I was their age. The workshop ended with applause, but the real reward was their hope, their drive, their refusal to let the world hold them back. Meanwhile, the consequences of my family's actions rippled outward. Luke's reputation in the business world had crumbled. His venomous Twitter outburst, calling me selfish, had backfired. Industry insiders, aware of his failed startup and reckless management, saw through his lies. Investors turned their backs, unwilling to fund someone who'd smeared his own sister while ignoring her support. Word spread fast in Naples's tight-knit business circles. Luke's name became synonymous with arrogance and failure. He couldn't secure a single meeting, his debts piling up, his once shiny persona reduced to whispers of bankruptcy. George faced his own fallout. His ties to Luke, his golden child, tainted his standing. A local real estate deal he'd been chasing fell through when partners learned of his son's collapse and his role in enabling it. Colleagues who'd once respected him now kept their distance, their trust eroded by his blind favoritism. Mary, too, paid a price. Her social circle, once vibrant with book clubs and charity lunches, shrank as friends pulled away. They'd heard about her bias, her willingness to let Luke vilify me while she stayed silent. Her shame was a quiet prison, her days marked by awkward glances and unanswered calls. I learned of their struggles through mutual acquaintances, brief mentions in passing. I felt no satisfaction, only a calm certainty. I'd given them years of chances, money, and support, only to be met with scorn. Now they faced the wreckage of their choices while I stood stronger than ever. I'd cut them out completely. No calls, no texts, no lingering ties. My phone no longer buzzed with their requests. My focus was my work, my platform, and the community I was building. Naples became my canvas, a place where I could inspire, not just survive. As the workshop wrapped, I stood at the podium, looking out at the young faces. "Your worth isn't defined by others' words," I said, my voice clear and firm, "but by what you build and give back." The words hung in the air, a promise I'd lived. The kids clapped, their energy a spark for the future. I stepped off the stage, my heart full, knowing I'd turned pain into purpose. My family's rejection had been a fire, but I'd forged something unbreakable from it. This was my legacy, not their doubts, but the lives I'd touched, the futures I'd helped shape.